Lena had always felt a storm of emotions brewing inside her, even when she was very young. Losing her mother at the tender age of 5 had left a hole in her life that nothing seemed able to fill. Mark, her stepfather, had stepped in almost immediately after the tragedy. He tried his best to care for her, to comfort her, to be the father she had never truly known. But to Lena he was always a stranger wearing the face of family. She could see the love in his eyes and the effort in his actions. But the absence of her real father, the one she had only glimpsed in faded photographs and half-remembered stories, made it impossible for her to fully accept Mark. She wanted to hate him, and part of her did. School became a battlefield where Lena tried to assert some sense of control over her chaotic feelings. Her teachers often noticed that she was sharp and intelligent, but also quick to anger and stubborn in ways that were almost self-destructive. At home, Mark tried to create routines and rules, believing that structure might help her heal. He encouraged her to do her homework, to talk about her feelings, and even tried to engage her in small, shared activities like cooking together or going for walks in the park. Lena would sometimes go along, but often she resisted, withdrawing into her room, slamming doors, and muttering under her breath. The tension between them grew over the years, and by the time Lena was 15 it had reached a breaking point. One afternoon, after coming home from school with a failing grade on a project she had tried her best on, she encountered Mark in the kitchen. He was trying to have a calm conversation, asking her why her grade had slipped, trying to understand the situation. But Lena was exhausted, not just from school, but from the invisible weight she carried every day. She felt the unfairness of life pressing down on her, a mother she would never see again, a stepfather who would never truly be hers, and the endless reminders of what she had lost. Her response was explosive. Words that had been simmering inside her for years spilled out uncontrollably. "You're not my father," she yelled, her voice echoing through the empty kitchen. The words were sharper than she intended, but they carried the full force of all her anger, grief, and confusion. Mark froze, his hands mid-motion as he held a pot, his eyes wide with shock and hurt. He had known this day might come, feared it even, but nothing could have prepared him for the sting of her words. He tried to speak, to explain, to reach her, but Lena's emotions were like a tidal wave. Pushing everything aside, she stormed out of the house that night, clutching a small bag she had packed in secret. The streets felt both frightening and liberating as she walked away from the home that had been hers in every legal sense, but never truly in her heart. She had chosen her aunt's house in another city because she wanted a fresh start, somewhere she could be free of Mark's presence, free of the constant reminder that she had no real father. Her aunt welcomed her, but even in the warmth of another home, Lena felt a strange emptiness. The house was unfamiliar, the faces were new, and she realized that running away didn't erase the pain, it only moved it to a new place. Over the following days, she tried to immerse herself in schoolwork and friends, hoping that distraction could replace the fatherly presence she had rejected. Yet, late at night, when the house was quiet and the world seemed distant, she could hear Mark's voice in her mind. She remembered the nights he had stayed up with her when she was sick, the way he had cheered her on at Little League games, the times he had sat silently in the living room while she cried. Her anger hadn't come from a lack of care, it had come from a sense of loss, a confusion that made love feel like betrayal. She began to feel a pang of guilt she didn't yet understand, but she pushed it away, convincing herself that she was strong, independent, and right to have left. Mark, meanwhile, was left behind with a heavy heart. He didn't shout, didn't scold, didn't try to force her back. He simply sat in the quiet house, writing letters and leaving voicemails, hoping that one day Lena would understand his love. Each unanswered message made his heart ache, but he refused to give up on her. His love was patient, persistent, and unconditional. He knew that the bridge between them had been damaged, but he also believed that no storm lasted forever. Lena's first weeks away were filled with small victories and quiet struggles. She learned to navigate her aunt's rules, made new friends, and began to taste the freedom she had craved. But the freedom was bittersweet. She realized that independence came with responsibility and that escaping from Mark's home didn't erase the complicated emotions she carried. Every decision she made reminded her of the family she had left behind, the man she had rejected, and the voice that had said words she couldn't take back, even in her determination to move forward. Lena found herself reflecting on the past. She remembered moments when she had secretly appreciated Mark's guidance. The time he had fixed her bicycle when she had fallen and scraped her knee, the late nights he had spent helping her with math homework she didn't understand, the quiet support he had given during moments of school anxiety. These memories made her chest ache with conflicting feelings, resentment mixed with gratitude, anger mixed with longing. Despite the inner turmoil, Lena pushed herself to focus on school and personal growth. She joined clubs, participated in community activities, and threw herself into hobbies that distracted her from the emptiness inside. She started writing in a journal, pouring out her anger, confusion, and tiny moments of happiness onto the pages. Writing became a safe space where she could process emotions she didn't yet have the courage to share with anyone. Her teenage years passed in a blur of academic achievement, social exploration, and private reflection. Yet, the shadow of that night, when she shouted at Mark, never fully disappeared. Every success she achieved carried a faint whisper of guilt, a reminder that she had pushed away the one person who had tried to be a constant in her life. And deep down, beneath layers of independence and defiance, Lena carried a seed of longing, a wish that one day she could reconcile the love she had rejected and the man who had never stopped loving her. The story of Lena's breaking point is not just about rebellion. It is about grief, confusion, and the complexity of human emotions. It shows how a young heart can lash out in pain, how misunderstandings can fracture bonds, and how love can endure even when it is rejected. It also sets the stage for the journey ahead, a journey that will challenge Lena to face her past, confront her feelings, and ultimately discover the depth of a love that never wavered. Lena moved into her aunt's house with a mixture of relief and nervousness. Everything was new. The room smelled of unfamiliar perfumes. The furniture was arranged differently than her old home, and her aunt, though kind, had her own rules and routines. At first, Lena felt like a visitor in her own life, unsure of where she belonged. She had thought that leaving Mark and the memories tied to him would bring freedom, but the reality was more complicated. Nights were especially hard. When the lights went out and the house grew quiet, Lena often found herself thinking about Mark. She remembered the small, tender moments she had once dismissed, the time he had stayed awake to comfort her after a nightmare, the long walks to school when she was too upset to go alone, the gentle way he had guided her without forcing her to accept him. These memories stirred a mix of anger and longing inside her, emotions she could not yet name. School became Lena's focus. She threw herself into her studies as a way to prove to herself and to the world that she was capable on her own. She wanted to show that she did not need anyone to help her succeed. This determination turned into obsession. She spent hours poring over textbooks, participating in clubs, and excelling in exams. Yet, despite her outward achievements, she could not escape the quiet gnawing of guilt. Letters from Mark arrived occasionally, polite and patient, filled with encouragement and love. Lena read them in secret, hiding the envelopes under her bed or in the pages of her notebooks. Each letter reminded her of what she had walked away from, and though she resisted it, a small part of her felt comforted by his words. Her social life helped her fill some of the emptiness. She made friends at school, people who did not know her past and did not carry the weight of her grief. Lena found herself laughing more freely with them, sharing stories and jokes that had nothing to do with her old life. Yet even in these moments of joy, there was a subtle sense of displacement. She was building a life that felt separate from her roots, but she could not completely erase the connection to the home she had left or the man she had rejected. The conflict inside her was constant desire to be independent and successful, and an unwilling recognition that someone had loved her in ways she could not yet fully appreciate. Time passed, and Lena grew into her late teens, maturing in ways she had never anticipated. Living away from Mark forced her to make choices and face consequences on her own. She learned to budget her money, manage her responsibilities, and navigate conflicts without leaning on anyone else. This independence strengthened her confidence, but it also deepened the subtle ache of absence. Every accomplishment, every recognition, carried a quiet question: would he be proud of me? It was a question she did not dare to answer aloud. She buried it beneath her daily routines and her relentless drive to succeed. Despite her resolve, there were moments when the pain of her past resurfaced unexpectedly. Walking past a store that sold her favorite childhood snacks, or seeing a couple with a father and daughter laughing together, triggered memories of the life she had once had. In these moments, Lena felt an ache that neither school nor friends could soothe. She began writing in a journal, pouring out feelings she could not speak aloud. The journal became a private confidant, a place to confront the complexity of her emotions, anger, regret, longing, and confusion. Writing allowed her to examine herself honestly, even if she could not yet forgive or understand the man she had left behind. Mark's persistent but gentle attempts to reconnect never stopped. He sent letters, checked in through phone calls, and sometimes even left small gifts. He never scolded her or demanded explanations, understanding that healing and reconciliation required patience. Each message he sent was filled with reminders of his encouragement for her studies, notes on holidays, gentle nudges to pursue her dreams. Lena's initial response to these efforts was avoidance. She would set the letters aside or hide them, fearing that reading them would force her to confront feelings she was not ready to face. But deep down, she could not fully ignore them. Over time, she noticed that his words, though simple, carried a warmth and persistence that touched something buried deep inside her heart. During this period, Lena also began to understand herself better. Away from the emotional turbulence of her old home, she could examine the patterns of her own behavior. She saw how grief had shaped her reactions, how fear of loss had made her push away someone who truly cared, and how anger often masked deeper sadness. This self-awareness, though painful, became a foundation for her growth. It allowed her to make choices with more intention and to recognize the difference between real grievances and the projection of unresolved pain. She started to see that leaving home was both a rebellion and a survival mechanism, and that her resentment toward Mark had been entangled with her grief for her mother over the years. Lena's achievements grew. She excelled academically, earned scholarships, and slowly built a sense of identity separate from her family history. Friends admired her determination, her discipline, and her independence. She became known as someone who could handle challenges with a quiet resilience, someone who seemed unshakable. But beneath the surface, there remained a silent longing for connection, a desire for reconciliation that she refused to acknowledge. Each milestone, whether it was graduating high school or earning recognition in a community project, carried an unspoken question about the man she had left behind and the relationship she had rejected. By the time she entered college, Lena had established a stable life in her new city. She had friends who supported her, routines that grounded her, and a sense of purpose that kept her focused. Yet even in these successes, she could not entirely escape the past. The letters she still occasionally received from Mark reminded her of what she had walked away from, and while she did not reply, she found herself rereading them, reflecting on his words late at night. These reflections stirred a mixture of guilt and gratitude, emotions she tried to suppress but could not fully ignore. She realized that while she had been striving for independence and success, she had also been growing in her understanding of what love and patience truly meant. Through all these years, Lena experienced a complex mix of freedom and loneliness. Leaving Mark's home had given her autonomy and a chance to build her own life, but it had also left a subtle emptiness. She began to understand that success and achievement alone could not replace the warmth and guidance of someone who had cared for her unconditionally. She had learned to navigate the world on her own, but the emotional growth she had achieved came with the realization that some bonds could never be erased, only postponed on. In this period of distance, Lena's life became a delicate balance of striving forward while quietly wrestling with the past. Every step she took toward independence was shadowed by the memory of the home she had left behind. Every letter from Mark, every memory of small acts of care, reminded her that love often persists even when it is rejected. And in these quiet, unspoken moments, Lena began to prepare without fully knowing it for the eventual confrontation with the past, and the man who had never stopped seeing her as his daughter. Lena had spent years building a life far from the home she had once left in anger, and by the time she was in her mid-20s, the distance had given her a kind of strength she had never known as a teenager. She had finished college, earned a degree in a field she loved, and started a job that challenged her in exciting ways. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. She was independent, successful, and admired by friends and colleagues. Yet beneath that surface, there was a quiet, persistent feeling she could not entirely ignore. A part of her longed for something more than achievements and routines. It was the part of her that remembered Mark, the man who had raised her, who had loved her when she had rejected him, and who had never stopped reaching out. For years, she had buried that longing, convincing herself that independence meant not needing anyone. But no matter how much she tried to push it away, the memories had a way of resurfacing when she least expected them. One evening, Lena found herself in a conversation with a mentor at work, someone she respected deeply. They were discussing career goals and personal growth when her mentor asked a simple question: "Who has influenced your life the most?" Lena froze. She had never spoken of Mark, not even to herself in an honest way. Her mind flashed through the years of letters she had received but never replied to, the small reminders of his patience, and the countless ways he had tried to remain a part of her life. For the first time, she had to confront the truth. He had shaped her in ways she could not deny, had helped form the person she had become, even if she had refused to see it at the time. The question lingered in her mind for days, stirring emotions she had long ignored. At first, Lena tried to rationalize her feelings. She reminded herself of the anger she had felt as a teenager, the words she had shouted, and the years of distance she had imposed. She told herself that reaching out now might be awkward, that too much time had passed, or that he might have moved on. Yet every rationalization felt hollow. Memories of his quiet support, the sacrifices he had made, and the love he had given without conditions kept resurfacing, demanding recognition. She realized that her anger had faded, replaced by a mix of regret and appreciation. She could no longer pretend that the past did not matter. Lena began reflecting on her own behavior with unusual honesty. She thought about how she had acted out of pain and confusion, lashing out at the person who had tried to be her anchor. She remembered the nights she had cried alone, the moments she had felt abandoned, and how she had misdirected that grief toward Mark. Understanding this did not erase the hurt, but it allowed her to see the situation from a different perspective. She could finally separate her emotions from the person he truly was, a man who had loved her without expectation, who had shown patience and care even when she resisted. This realization was both comforting and painful, forcing her to reckon with the years of distance and the damage her words had caused. Over the next few weeks, Lena began to notice small changes in her feelings. She no longer approached the thought of Mark with fear or resentment. Instead, she felt a growing desire to reconnect, to bridge the gap that years of silence had created. She started revisiting the letters he had sent, reading them carefully and absorbing the warmth behind each word. Each message reminded her of his unwavering support, his hope for her success, and his enduring love. It became clear that his presence had never truly left her life, even if she had tried to sever it. The realization stirred a sense of urgency. She wanted to see him again, to express the gratitude and understanding she had long suppressed. Lena's journey of reflection also revealed her own growth. She recognized that her teenage self had acted impulsively, fueled by grief and confusion, while her adult self had the maturity to approach the situation with empathy and openness. She understood that reconciling with Mark would not be simple. It required patience, honesty, and the willingness to face the emotions she had long avoided. Yet she also knew that waiting indefinitely would only prolong the unspoken tension in her heart. The desire to reconnect grew stronger each day, and with it, a mixture of excitement and nervousness about what that meeting might bring as she prepared to take the next step. Lena thought about what she wanted to say, how she would approach the conversation, and the emotions she needed to express. She realized that it was not just about apologizing, it was about acknowledging the years of care and love she had ignored, expressing gratitude, and finally allowing herself to reconnect with someone who had always been there. The thought of seeing him again filled her with anticipation, but also a healthy dose of anxiety. She wondered how he would react, whether he had held on to resentment, or if he had already moved on. Despite these uncertainties, Lena felt ready. She knew that the past could not be undone, but the future could be shaped by the choices she made in that moment. Lena's professional life continued to flourish during this period of introspection. She excelled in her work, earned recognition from colleagues, and took on responsibilities that challenged her in new ways. Yet, even in the midst of success, the thought of reconnecting with Mark lingered in her mind. It became a quiet, persistent presence, reminding her that personal growth was not only about career achievements, but also about emotional reconciliation. She began to understand that healing and closure were just as important as ambition, and that reconnecting with someone who had shaped her life was a necessary step toward completeness. Slowly, Lena began reaching out in small ways. She started with a tentative message, simple and heartfelt, acknowledging the passage of time and expressing a desire to reconnect. The act itself was liberating, finally allowing herself to take responsibility for the distance, and to extend a hand toward someone she had loved and rejected. Writing the message required courage. It meant confronting years of guilt, regret, and unspoken emotions. Yet it also brought a sense of relief, as if a weight that had been pressing on her chest for years was finally being lifted. When Mark received the message, there was a pause, a moment of quiet reflection. He recognized the tone of sincerity and the effort it took for Lena to reach out. His heart swelled with a mixture of relief and hope. The years of waiting, the unanswered letters, the quiet patience, it all led to this moment. A response was sent, warm and welcoming, filled with encouragement and love, offering an invitation to meet and talk. For Lena, reading his reply was a transformative experience. She realized that the love she had once rejected had never wavered, and that reconciliation was not only possible but also deeply meaningful. In the weeks that followed, Lena prepared for their meeting. She thought about what she wanted to say, how she would express her gratitude, and how she could communicate the emotions she had kept buried for so long. The anticipation was intense, but it was also filled with hope. She reflected on her journey, the years of independence, the successes she had achieved, and the emotional growth she had experienced, and recognized that this reunion was the next important step in her life. It was not just about reconnecting with Mark, but also about embracing the lessons of patience, forgiveness, and love that had guided her journey from the beginning. As the day of the meeting approached, Lena felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She knew that this encounter could change the course of her life, that it held the potential for healing and closure, and that it would allow her to finally acknowledge the role Mark had played in shaping her into the person she had become. She understood that the past could not be erased, but it could be honored, and that the love that had been patient for so many years was finally ready to be embraced. The turning point had arrived, and Lena felt ready to face it, ready to bridge the distance, and ready to finally recognize the unwavering love that had waited for her all along. Lena felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation as she boarded the train to visit Mark. It had been years since she had last seen him, years filled with distance, silence, and unspoken words. The thought of finally facing him made her heart race. She wondered how he would look, whether he had changed much, and how she would find the courage to express everything she had carried in her heart for so long. The memories of her teenage anger, the words she had shouted, and the years she had spent avoiding him pressed on her mind. But beneath them all was a quiet hope, a hope that the bond they had shared, though strained, could be restored. When she arrived at Mark's neighborhood, familiar streets triggered a wave of nostalgia and nervousness. The house had changed slightly, but its essence remained the same. Lena hesitated at the doorstep for a moment, gathering the courage to knock, and then raised her hand. When the door opened, Mark stood there, older and perhaps a little wearier, but his eyes held the same warmth she remembered from childhood. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was heavy with years of silence, unspoken emotions, and the weight of things left unresolved. Mark's expression softened as recognition and emotion filled his face. He stepped forward slowly, and in that simple motion, the years of separation began to dissolve. Lena's first words were awkward, a mixture of apology, hesitation, and nervous excitement. She had rehearsed the conversation countless times in her mind, but the reality felt different. Mark smiled gently, motioning for her to come in. As she stepped inside, She noticed the familiar scent of the house, slightly different but comforting, and memories of her childhood filled her mind. The living room held the same worn furniture, the photos on the walls chronicling years of family events, and even the small details of the room reminded her of times she had both cherished and resented. Everything seemed frozen in time, yet alive with possibility. Their initial conversation was soft, cautious, and careful. Lena struggled to express the complexity of her feelings, unsure of how to convey years of regret, gratitude, and understanding in a few sentences. Mark listened attentively, his presence calm and reassuring. He did not interrupt or rush her, allowing her to speak at her own pace. Lena realized that this was part of why she had always felt safe with him. Even when she had rejected him, his patience and respect for her emotions had never wavered. The tension began to ease as words slowly bridged the gap, and she felt a sense of relief she had not anticipated. As the hours passed, Lena and Mark shared memories of the past. They laughed softly at childhood anecdotes, remembered small triumphs and misadventures, and even acknowledged the moments of pain and misunderstanding. Lena admitted the anger and rebellion she had felt as a teenager, the reasons behind her harsh words, and the emotions that had driven her away. Mark responded with gentle understanding, never showing bitterness or judgment, only the quiet presence of someone who had loved her unconditionally. Each acknowledgement, each shared memory, brought a sense of closeness that had been missing for years. During their conversation, Lena noticed how much Mark had waited for her, not in an intrusive way, but with patience and care. The letters, the occasional calls, the little gestures of love, they all spoke of a steadfast commitment that had endured despite rejection. She realized the depth of his character, the selflessness of his actions, and the patience required to maintain hope over so many years. This realization stirred something deep inside her, a mixture of admiration, gratitude, and remorse for the years she had allowed anger and grief to cloud her judgment. Mark, in turn, expressed the feelings he had held over the years. He spoke of missing her presence, of worrying about her, and of never giving up hope that she would return. His words were not reproachful but filled with the tenderness of someone who had waited silently, allowing her to grow and learn on her own. Lena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she absorbed the depth of his love. She understood that the man she had once rejected had never stopped valuing her, never stopped seeing her as his daughter, and never stopped offering support, even when she had refused it. The atmosphere between them began to shift from cautious to warm. Lena shared stories of her life during the years of separation, her struggles, successes, and the lessons she had learned. Mark listened, genuinely interested, celebrating her achievements and offering encouragement for the challenges she faced. The conversation flowed naturally, as if the years of distance had been compressed into a few hours of heartfelt dialogue. Lena realized that this reunion was not about erasing the past but about acknowledging it, understanding it, and building a bridge for the future. Over shared meals, quiet walks around the neighborhood, and long conversations, Lena began to feel a sense of belonging she had not experienced since leaving home. She noticed the subtle gestures of care that Mark continued to show, the way he prepared meals with thoughtfulness, remembered her favorite snacks, and shared little anecdotes to make her smile. Each act reminded her that love is often shown in small, consistent ways, rather than grand gestures. This realization deepened her appreciation and strengthened the emotional bond that had been waiting to be restored by the end of the visit. Lena felt a profound sense of relief and emotional release. The years of anger, guilt, and avoidance had been confronted, and the reconciliation, though still tentative, was underway. She realized that she no longer needed to carry the burden of separation. The opportunity to rebuild their relationship had arrived, and she was ready to embrace it. The visit ended with a quiet understanding, a promise to stay connected, and the shared acknowledgement that love and patience had endured the test of time. Lena left Mark's house with a lighter heart. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, not only in her personal life but in understanding the importance of forgiveness, gratitude, and connection. The journey had been emotional, challenging, and transformative, but it had also been deeply rewarding. She understood that the love she had once rejected had never truly left her life, and that the bond with Mark was not defined by words shouted in anger, but by years of consistent care, patience, and hope. As she traveled back to her city, Lena reflected on the reunion. She thought about the lessons she had learned, that patience can outlast anger, that understanding can heal old wounds, and that expressing gratitude can transform relationships. She felt a sense of accomplishment, not measured by her career or achievements, but by the courage to confront the past and the willingness to reconnect with someone who had shaped her life in profound ways. The visit had planted seeds of renewal, hope, and emotional growth that would continue to shape her journey in the years to come. Lena returned from her visit with Mark feeling a sense of peace she had not known in years. The emotional walls she had built around herself since her teenage rebellion were slowly beginning to crumble. She realized that the anger and distance that had defined so much of her life had been replaced by understanding, gratitude, and a deep sense of connection. Each day after the reunion, she reflected on the time she had lost, the words she had said, and the opportunities she had missed to express love and appreciation. These reflections did not make her feel regretful in a destructive way. Instead, they motivated her to be more present, more open, and more engaged with the people who truly mattered in her life. Her professional life continued to grow, and with each new accomplishment, Lena felt a stronger desire to share her successes with Mark. She realized that the person who had helped shape her values, taught her resilience, and believed in her potential, deserved to witness her achievements. The small victories that had once felt personal and solitary now held new meaning because she had someone to celebrate them with. This newfound perspective changed the way she approached her career, her relationships, and even her daily routines. The acknowledgement of Mark's influence on her life infused her actions with a sense of purpose that went beyond personal ambition. Lena began spending more time with Mark, visiting him regularly and including him in small, meaningful moments of her life. They cooked together, shared stories, and sometimes just sat in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's presence. These ordinary, simple moments became profound acts of reconnection. Lena noticed that the laughter they shared came more easily now, free from the tension of past misunderstandings. She found herself opening up in ways she had never allowed herself to before, discussing her dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. The trust and comfort that had been buried beneath years of distance resurfaced, stronger than ever, proving that love can endure even long separations. Mark, too, showed subtle changes in his approach. He continued to offer guidance, but now with a sense of partnership rather than authority. He listened to Lena's thoughts with genuine interest, respected her independence, and celebrated her decisions. This balance allowed Lena to feel both supported and autonomous, a combination she had yearned for as a teenager but could only fully appreciate as an adult. Their relationship evolved into a mature bond, built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared history. It was no longer defined by rebellion or guilt, but by the conscious effort to maintain connection and nurture love. As Lena continued to reconnect with Mark, she also began sharing her story with others in subtle ways. At work, during informal conversations or public speeches, she would sometimes reflect on the importance of family, mentorship, and the people who support you quietly over the years. She realized that her journey was not only personal but also instructive, a reminder that patience, understanding, and unconditional support can have lasting impacts. Her acknowledgement of Mark's role in her life became more public over time, not as an obligation but as a genuine expression of gratitude. One of the most significant moments came when Lena reached a milestone in her career, an achievement she had worked tirelessly for. Instead of celebrating alone, she invited Mark to join her at the recognition event. Walking into the room together, Lena felt a mixture of pride and emotional fulfillment. When she addressed the audience, she made a point to mention the people who had influenced her journey, and her words naturally included Mark. She spoke of his patience, his guidance, and the unwavering belief he had in her abilities. This public acknowledgement was not just a celebration of her success, but also a tribute to a man who had loved her through anger, distance, and years of unspoken longing. Mark's eyes glistened as he listened, proud and humbled by the recognition, understanding that the bond they shared had been restored and celebrated in front of others. Beyond professional milestones, Lena found that her personal growth had deepened through this reconciliation. She learned the value of forgiveness, not just forgiving others, but forgiving herself for mistakes, harsh words, and moments of rebellion. She understood that love is not erased by anger or distance. Rather, it can grow stronger when nurtured with patience, honesty, and effort. Lena became more empathetic, not only toward Mark but also toward herself and others who had complicated relationships. Her capacity to connect deeply and authentically expanded, and she found greater satisfaction in friendships, romantic relationships, and family interactions. The bond between Lena and Mark began to influence everyday decisions. She sought his advice for major life choices, knowing that his guidance was informed by years of love and experience. Yet she also realized that she no longer needed to depend on him in the same way she had as a child. Their interactions became a balance of mentorship and mutual respect, a dynamic that brought both comfort and empowerment. Lena experienced the joy of shared experiences without losing her sense of self, appreciating the delicate harmony of a relationship that had survived trials and distance. As time passed, Lena and Mark created new traditions together. Simple acts such as cooking favorite meals, taking walks, celebrating small achievements, or just spending quiet evenings talking became rituals of connection. These moments reinforced the emotional foundation that had been rebuilt, proving that consistent, loving presence can heal wounds and restore trust. Lena realized that the relationship she had once feared and resisted had evolved into something far richer than she could have imagined, a partnership rooted in love, respect, and shared history. This renewed relationship also allowed Lena to reflect on her past with clarity and acceptance. She recognized the mistakes of her teenage years without bitterness, seeing them instead as steps on a journey that led to growth and reconciliation. The anger and rebellion that had once defined her relationship with Mark were transformed into lessons about communication, empathy, and understanding. Lena appreciated that the path to reconnection had required courage, patience, and emotional honesty, qualities she now carried into other areas of her life. Ultimately, Lena's story became one of transformation. From a rebellious teenager who shouted words she did not fully understand, she had grown into an adult capable of recognizing love, expressing gratitude, and fostering meaningful relationships. The years of distance and misunderstanding had not diminished the bond with Mark. Instead, they had tested it, proving that true care endures challenges. Lena understood that the love she had once rejected had been a constant, guiding her even in absence, shaping her into a resilient, empathetic, and grateful person. The journey also taught Lena the value of expressing gratitude actively, not only privately but openly. She realized that acknowledging those who support and guide us strengthens relationships and fosters mutual respect. By embracing this principle, she transformed her connection with Mark into a living, evolving bond that honored the past while building a hopeful future. Their relationship was no longer defined by pain, anger, or distance. It was defined by presence, acknowledgement, and shared joy. Lena found that this transformation had ripple effects throughout her life. She approached new challenges with greater confidence, interacted with others with deeper empathy, and nurtured relationships with an awareness of their fragility and value. The experience of reconciliation with Mark became a source of strength, teaching her that patience, honesty, and love can bridge even the deepest divides. Lena's life was richer, fuller, and more meaningful because she had dared to confront her past, embrace her emotions, and allow herself to reconnect with someone who had never stopped caring. Over time, Lena and Mark's bond grew stronger than it had ever been before. They celebrated milestones together, supported each other through challenges, and shared the quiet, everyday moments that define family. The journey from anger to understanding, from rejection to gratitude, was complete. Lena had discovered not only the depth of Mark's love but also the strength of her own heart, the ability to forgive, to appreciate, and to build meaningful, lasting connections. The story of Lena and Mark illustrates the transformative power of patience, love, and reconciliation. It shows how relationships, even when strained or interrupted, can be healed through courage, empathy, and acknowledgement. Through her journey, Lena learned that success and independence are meaningful, but they are enriched when shared with those who have shaped and supported us. Her life became a testament to the enduring nature of care, the importance of gratitude, and the profound rewards of reconnecting with the people who truly matter.